most of us are wrapping up warm at the moment and turning up the heating in preparation for this week of cold weather. But for people who are homeless and having to sleep rough on the streets, this weather can be life-threatening. Well, here in the studio to tell us more is Lorraine, who runs a community group to help homeless people, and the former professional footballer and social commentator Mickey Ambrose. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Mickey, you're here to talk about what's happening in the borough where you live, which is in Newham, in Greater London, but it's a story that could be replicated up and down the country with regard to people sleeping rough on the streets in these freezing temperatures.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I live in the borough of Newham for a few years, and as I say, it's a nationwide problem. I mean, we've got 1 in 25 people that are sleeping rough. You know, that's out of 340,000 people, 13,000 sleeping rough, unfortunately. And, of course, there's the hidden homeless as well that we don't know about. I mean, it's quite shocking that, you know, I walk through Stratford Broadway Centre with my wife and just see basically people in sleeping bags, around 35, 40 people, and it's terrible.
Lorraine, you volunteer in Newham because, you know, you see this happening around you and you want to help. What are you seeing? I mean, these are distressing scenes from the local shopping centre.
Well, I see it daily and it's growing. When I first started doing this 2.5 years ago, there was 80 people or more. These people are dying. These people are freezing. We've had deaths in the shopping centre, we've had stabbings. We think that people go into the shopping centre because they're safe. They're not always so safe because they're a target, and they're targeted by the general public. These people have fallen on bad times. They're going through hard times in their life, and they need help and support. They were feeling safe in there, and recently they was issued ASBOs by our local council, which is still...
They had to move out of the shopping centre.
Within 5 minutes. It's still under investigation. My local mayor, he's looking into it. I give him his due. I've had a meeting with him. I brought him out with me last week, and he's seen the problem for himself. So they can't say they don't know what's happening in our borough. It's terrible.
It's interesting, isn't it, Mickey, because we're relying on social activists like Lorraine to draw attention to what's going on our streets. How seriously are councils taking it? Because particularly with this cold snap, we are reading stories in the paper this morning about councils making emergency shelters for those who are homeless on the streets. But they shouldn't be in a situation where it has to be emergency shelters. They should be helping them before this cold weather.
Well, this has been, I mean, this has been going on for years, hasn't it, really? You know, people sleeping rough. Councils have a responsibility. I know there's been the welfare cuts and so on. I mean, I know that £400,000 grant was given by the government to Newham. I think they're still sitting on that money. You know, we've got to do something. I mean, it's so horrendous at this day and age. These are human beings. You know, these are people who've got parents, you know. So when you walk past, you think, oh, don't bother about it. But we should be bothered about it.
Somebody's child.
It's somebody's child, that's right.
I mean, Lorraine, when you talk to them, you must hear all sorts of stories about how they've ended up on the streets. Not everybody has the same story.
People from the army, disabled. Everybody has the impression that all homeless people are drug addicts and alcoholics. I know many people that started on the street with a lovely, clean clothing and a suitcase, and now they're on drugs because that's the only way they can cope with the cold and the way they are. You know, it's dreadful. We go out every week now. Sometimes every week we're finding new people, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds. You know, these are children. And they say, not just my council, all councils, you have to be vulnerable. How much vulnerable can you be with -2 and 3 degrees? People are freezing to death. Outside the House of Lords, people die. It's a big thing now. They want to talk about it because that person died there. What about the ones that died in Stratford 3 weeks ago?
Yeah.
I mean, Lorraine, along with Mickey, you are putting pressure on your local council and councils up and down the country to do something about the problem of homelessness on our streets, which is on the rise in the last few years. But what can people at home do to help, Lorraine? Because you talk about the human element of it, and you've spoken to these people who are sleeping in shopping centres on the streets, and you know their backstories. What can people do at home to make a difference?
Support me. Support me and people like me. I'm a community group with no funding, no money. Everything that comes to me comes through my friends, family and members. Join me on Facebook, Lola's Homeless, the same as other groups. I'm not the only one. I started it in Stratford, but there are many other groups.
Yeah.
The homeless are being fed in Stratford and they're quite looked after, but they've not got a home, they've not got a warm place. Oh, and they do put the air conditioning on late at night,
yeah.
to make them very cold
I
in
mean,
the shopping centre.
I mean, what was quite terrible was at 4:30 a couple of weeks ago, officers came into the shopping mall and basically say you've sort of evicted those.
5 minutes to get out of the shopping centre.
Yeah.
And not just out of the shopping centre, out of the borough. Where are these people going to go?
Okay.
They're just making it somebody else's problem.
Well,
We
Lorraine,
need shelters.
thank you so much for highlighting the problem.
You're
You're
welcome.
talking specifically about Newham Council, but it's a scene that's replicated
It's a
up and down
it's a big
the
problem.
country. We do have a statement from Newham Council. We contacted them from their response, and they said this, that the incident in Stratford Mall that Mickey and Lorraine were referring to there was extremely unfortunate, and the operation was not approved by the council prior to commencement. As a result, an internal inquiry was launched and will report back to members soon. All the community protection notices issued to the rough sleepers were immediately cancelled by the council. That the reaction of Newham Council.